No one in Clearwater was prepared for what a simple children's dance class would reveal. On that particular night, at the end of an ordinary day, the floor seemed to come out from under Melissa's feet as she saw her 9-year-old daughter leave the studio shaking from head to toe, as if she had just been through something unbelievable. Emily's face was very pale, her eyes shining for a reason that was not joy, and her icy hands clinging to the hem of her backpack showed a fear that the girl could not put into words. "Mum, I don't want to dance with him again," she whispered, her voice low, almost swallowed up by the noise of the parking lot and the muffled sound of the music still playing inside. That same week, when Melissa decided in desperation to peek through the narrow window of Professor Mark's closed office, a man the whole town trusted, what she saw there didn't match the image of security everyone was repeating. And the truth hidden behind those mirrors began to show itself in a shocking way, although not yet complete. But to understand how that mother got to the point of trembling along with her own daughter outside a dance hall, you have to go back a few weeks in time, to days when the word fear did not yet dominate her thoughts. Melissa Carter was 41 years old and lived in a quiet neighborhood of Tampa, Florida, in a simple one-story house with a balcony, an old swing and flower pots that she took care of herself on weekends. After the divorce a few years earlier, the house had become quieter, but Emily's presence filled every room with a mixture of sweetness and shyness that made any effort worthwhile. Melissa worked in a nearby insurance office, following a routine that started early with freshly brewed coffee and a lovingly prepared lunchbox, and ended at night when, as tired as she still found time to listen to her daughter's stories before bed. Emily, at the age of 9, was the heart of that house. The girl was not one of those children who talk loudly or run non-stop, but she had a different sparkle in her eye when it came to music and dance. Since she was a little girl, she liked to spin around alone in the living room with colorful socks, pretending that the carpet floor was a big stage for a show. After her parents' divorce, dancing became her most cherished refuge. When sadness hit, Emily would put videos of old performances on television and try to repeat the simple steps, with a shy smile that hurt and at the same time warmed Melissa's heart. Her mother knew that, more than a hobby, dancing was the way her daughter had found to tell the world that she still wanted to be happy despite so much change. In that neighborhood, many people knew each other by name. The wide streets, with tall trees and American flags waving in front of some houses, gave the comfortable feeling that nothing very serious could happen there. Neighbors greeted each other as they took out the trash. Children still played on bicycles on the sidewalk, and Saturday mornings smelled of coffee coming from several kitchens at once. Tampa, despite being a big city, seemed to have turned into a small village within the part that Melissa called home. She liked that feeling of security, knowing that her daughter could walk beside her without her heart being in her hand at every step. It was on one of these Saturdays in early fall that Melissa first saw the colorful advertisement for the Clearwater Dance Academy. They were at the neighborhood market, the one where she always bought fruit, milk, and loaf of bread, when she noticed, near the cashier, a flashy poster with pictures of girls smiling in bright tutus and perfect poses. The name of the school, written in elegant letters, was accompanied by phrases that promised a welcoming environment, special classes for children, and presentations at important events. Next to the poster, there were folded brochures with more information and a larger photo of the studio's owner, Mark Reynolds. Mark appeared to be about 35 years old, with a serene expression, a wide smile, and the kind of look that many people would call trustworthy. The brochure talked about his experience with children's dance, years of dedication to shows in schools in the region, and how he took care of each class as if it were a big family. Melissa held the paper with one hand while she arranged the shopping cart with the other, and noticed that Emily had stopped right next to her, looking at the photos with an old twinkle in her eyes. "Mom, look," The girl pointed to a photo in which 3 girls, her age, were lined up in front of a mirror with pink flats and bows in their hair. "It looks so pretty." That simple sentence made Melissa's heart soften. There were so many days when Emily came home from school tired, talking little, that seeing that glow of will mixed with hope seemed like a gift. For a moment, she found herself imagining her daughter on that stage, with those lights, perhaps smiling again, as she did before the divorce, without that weight hidden in her eyes. "Would you like to try?" Melissa asked carefully, as if offering something important. "We can go and see what it's like. If you don't like it, we don't continue, okay?" Emily bit her lip thoughtfully, and then nodded her head with a sheepish smile. "I really wanted to dance for real, Mom. Not only here at home." The phrase echoed in Melissa's mind until the evening, when the two were already at home, putting away the groceries, organizing the week. She placed the booklet attached with a magnet to the refrigerator door in a place where she could always see it. The next day, after preparing breakfast and checking on Emily's chores, he picked up the phone and called the studio number. The voice that answered on the other side was masculine, calm, and presented itself naturally. "Clearwater Dance Academy. This is Mark. What can I help with?" Melissa quickly explained that she had seen the ad at the market, that she had a 9-year-old daughter who loved to dance but had never taken formal classes. Mark responded with that trained sympathy that seems to embrace the phone line. He said he would love to meet Emily, that he had a class exactly in her age group, and that if they wanted, they could go there in an afternoon to see the space, without commitment. 2 days later, there they were, entering the small neighborhood mall where the studio was. The place had a central corridor with a few small stores, one for pet products, another for sewing, a simple ice cream parlor. At the end of the hallway on the right, a white sign with pink letters indicated Clearwater Dance Academy. Even outside, it was possible to hear the distant sound of American pop music, with upbeat beats and young voices. When she opened the glass door, Melissa was immediately hit by a mixture of waxed floor smells, mild disinfectant and cheap perfume, typical of environments where many people circulate every day. The walls of the studio were painted in shades of light pink and white. In some excerpts, there were framed photos of performances, girls of various ages on illuminated stages with bright clothes and wide smiles. A simple counter served as a reception, with a young girl who greeted them with a quick smile, asked them to sign a form, and called Mark over the internal intercom. A few minutes later, he appeared. Mark was exactly as in the photo in the brochure, perhaps a little taller than Melissa had imagined, with neatly combed brown hair, a fitted black t-shirt, training pants, and a wide smile that showed many teeth. He walked toward them safely, but the tone of his voice remained soft. "You must be Emily," he said, tilting his head slightly, without exaggerating the intimacy. "Your mother told me that you like to dance." "Is this true?" Emily, shy, shrugged her shoulders a little, but replied, "Yes, I do. I dance at home." "That's the best school," he commented with a slight laugh. "Those who dance at home usually have a natural way. Let's see that." Melissa watched everything, trying to be rational. "He looks very polite," she thought, noticing the way he stood in front of the girl, not too close, not too far. At the same time, a small voice in the back of her mind reminded her that appearances can be deceiving, but it pushed her away. At that moment, she just wanted to believe that she had found something good for her daughter. Mark led them into the large main room, separated by a wooden door with frosted glass. As she entered, Emily's eyes lit up. There were mirrors covering an entire wall, parallel grab bars, a very smooth wooden floor, and some speakers in the corners. In the background, a few girls Emily's age were stretching, in colorful workout clothes and hair tied in ponytails. The scene looked like something out of one of those videos that the girl watched on television. "This is the entry-level class," Mark explained, his voice proud. "We work on discipline but also joy. I always say that dance needs to be good for the body and the heart." Melissa felt a pang of relief. All that, at least at first glance, seemed like a dream come true for Emily. Mark turned to his mother and said, "If she wants, she can take a trial class today. You can wait there at the reception or right here if you prefer." The girl looked at her mother with a mixture of anxiety and desire, as if she was afraid to ask for too much. Melissa smiled, running her hand through her daughter's hair. "If you want, you can stay. I wait right here and then we'll talk. If you don't like it, that's okay, Emily. We go away and look for something else." "I want to try," she murmured. Thus began Emily's first class at Clearwater Dance Academy. Melissa sat on a bench in the corner of the room next to the door and watched as the girls lined up. Mark put on music, explained the steps, made corrections with an open hand, without taking too long on anyone. His expression was one of concentration, sometimes of joy, and the class seemed to respond well. It wasn't until the middle of the class that Melissa felt the first little tightness in her chest. In a moment of posture correction, Mark approached Emily from behind to adjust the position of her arms. He put his hands on the girl's forearms and stood up a little, saying something in her ear. In the distance, Melissa couldn't hear what it was, but she saw her daughter give a slight start, as if she had been taken by surprise. Then Emily forced a smile and continued the movement. Melissa's instinct ignited, still low, like a small flame. "Maybe I'm exaggerating," she thought silently. "It's dance class. He needs to play to correct his posture. That's normal, isn't it?" She tried to divert her attention, observing the rest of the class. She saw Emily miss a few steps and then get it right. She saw the other girls approaching her during breaks, saying something that made her laugh. At the end, the group did a short sequence of steps, and Mark clapped his hands, saying that they were doing very well for the first week of end-of-year rehearsals. When the class ended, the girls were released to grab their backpacks and leave. Emily came towards her mother with a very red face, sweating more than Melissa imagined to be normal for this activity, and held the strap of her backpack tightly. Her breathing was a little quick. Melissa stood up immediately. "So, how was it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "It was," Emily replied, but without the enthusiasm Melissa expected. She glanced quickly back in the direction of the teacher, and then lowered her eyes, as if afraid that someone would read her thoughts. Mark approached, smiling. "She has a way, yes. You can see that he likes music. If he continues like this, he will soon participate in the bigger presentations. You can think calmly, but I believe it would be great for her to stay on the team." Melissa thanked her, pressing the bag against her body. As he walked to his car, he noticed that Emily's hand was cold when the girl picked it up to cross the parking lot. The contrast with the hot face caused a lump in the mother's throat. In the car, with her seatbelts on, Melissa started the engine and waited a few seconds, looking at her daughter out of the corner of her eye. And then, "Tell me, did you really like it? Want to come back?" Emily was slow to answer. He kept fiddling with the hem of his shirt, watching the street through the window. "It was kind of hard," she said at last. "There are many steps, and he's very serious sometimes." "Seriously how?" Melissa insisted, not wanting to seem to press, but feeling a thread of worry rise up her back. "Ah, seriously. He says that it has to be perfect, which is special." Emily bit her lip. "But I think that's how it is, right?" The word special kept spinning in Melissa's mind, not finding a place to settle. On the outside, she just took a deep breath and replied, "Some things are difficult at first. If you feel bad, you tell me, okay? I don't want anything here to make you sad." Emily nodded but said nothing more. The car continued through the streets of Tampa, with the late afternoon getting more and more golden. The author of that story, if she could pause time at that moment, would say that there, in fact, the universe had already given the first warning. But mothers often need more than one sign to believe that they are not seeing things where there are none. In the following days, the routine was established. Twice a week, Always in the late afternoon, Melissa would pick up Emily from school, take her home for a quick snack, a cheese sandwich, a piece of fruit, sometimes yogurt, help the girl change her clothes, and then drive to the small neighborhood mall. At first, there was an atmosphere of novelty. Emily talked about the friends she was making, mentioned the name of a girl named Sarah, who was more uninhibited, and another named Chloe, who made as many mistakes as she did, and that's why the two laughed together at the time of the most complicated steps. In the second week, Melissa noticed a detail that made her frown. On the way out, Emily talked, but on the way back home, after class, the girl began to be a little quieter. Instead of describing the steps, she talked about things from school, the neighbor's dog, the food in the cafeteria, as if she were deliberately diverting the subject. When her mother asked directly what they had done at the dance, Emily answered with short sentences, "Ah, the same steps. It was cool. He wants us to improve for the presentation. Nothing goes deeper than that." One afternoon, while waiting at the studio reception, Melissa ordered a coffee from the old machine next to the door. The smell of weak coffee mixed with the floor disinfectant gave a strange air to the environment, at the same time welcoming and artificial. There were some plastic chairs lined up, and in two of them other mothers were playing with their cell phones, distracted. The clock on the wall marked the progress of the class, each minute seeming longer than the last. Suddenly, the music coming from the training room was turned down. Melissa was surprised. Then he heard muffled laughter from children, a low chorus that resembled an inside game. Soon after, a heavy silence came, almost as if someone had pressed a button and turned everything off. In the meantime, Mark's voice came through the closed door, much lower, as if he were giving an instruction that was not for anyone to hear. Melissa couldn't make out the words, but the tone made her feel her stomach turn. "Why am I so nervous about this?" she wondered. "Is it just because it's a man with several girls in a closed room? Is it my thing because of everything we see on television?" His heart tightened again. For a few seconds, she thought about getting up, walking to the door and asking to come in, with the excuse of picking up her daughter early. But he held back. She didn't want to sound too suspicious, especially because until then no one had said anything concrete about any problem. The other mothers seemed very calm, laughing at messages on their cell phones, commenting on purchases and recipes without showing any discomfort with the fact of leaving their daughters there. Still, the image of the closed door, with the music fading down and the teacher's low voice, stuck in Melissa's mind like one of those thoughts that come back every time silence comes. In the car, on the way home, she glanced at Emily's hands. He noticed that his daughter tightened her seatbelt so tightly that her fingers became slightly whitish. "Is everything okay, Emily?" he asked as softly as possible. "Yes, Mum. I'm just tired today." "Tired of what? From school or from dance?" The girl shrugged. "Both." The quick answer, almost irritated, did not match her daughter's usual way. Melissa took a deep breath and thought, "Am I the one who is seeing things where there is none? Am I filling her head with my worries?" At the same time, that word Emily had used before, special, began to take on a different weight in her memory. Special for whom? Special how? Special why? In the days that followed, things continued to look normal on the outside, but on the inside, something about the mother-daughter relationship was changing. Melissa could tell that Emily had longer moments of silence, as if she was hiding some secret. On other occasions, however, the girl seemed genuinely happy when talking about small achievements. She had managed to do a spin without losing her balance. She was learning to memorize the sequence of an entire song. She laughed, remembering a friend who always raised her arm on the wrong side. This mixture of joy and silence created a cloud of confusion within Melissa. On some nights, lying in bed, she stared at the ceiling and tried to organize her thoughts. She remembered Mark's smile, the confidence of other mothers, the photos of beautiful presentations, and she struggled to think that maybe it was all just her own insecurity as a single mother. afraid that she wasn't making the right decisions for her daughter. At the same time, however, there was something that did not leave her alone: the way Emily squeezed her backpack when leaving the room, the exaggerated blush on her face, the accelerated breathing, and the difficulty in talking about some specific moments in class. On one of those days, already at home, she tried a different approach. "Emily, you know you can tell me anything, don't you?" he asked, as the two washed the dishes after dinner in a kitchen lit by a soft yellow light. "I know, Mom. Even if something makes you uncomfortable somewhere, at school, at dance, at someone's house, anything." Emily rinsed a plate slowly, staring blankly at the water running from the tap. "I know. And is there anything you want to tell me?" There was a short silence, but it seemed much longer than it actually was. Emily put the plate on the colander, dried her hands on the cloth, and then replied, "It's just that he wants us to be perfect, Mom. He says that this group is special, that it is not just any class, that we have to hold on." The expression on the girl's face was hard to read. A little pride, a little tiredness, and a thread of almost hidden fear. "And you like that?" Melissa insisted. "I think so," was all the daughter said, before changing the subject and asking if they could watch an old movie on television. That night, Melissa couldn't help but feel a strange feeling. On the one hand, she knew that many teachers in any field use words like special and perfection to motivate students. On the other, the way Emily described it made her think of limits being stretched beyond what a child should bear. Doubt settled in her heart, and from then on, each trip to the studio was accompanied by greater attention to detail. Even though she tried to keep the tone light for her daughter, inside she no longer saw the Clearwater Dance Academy as just a cheerful place with pink walls and bright mirrors. Now, every corner seemed to hide an unanswered question, and Mark's every polite smile sounded to her like a piece of a puzzle she didn't yet know how to put together. If you've made it this far, it's because real history interests you, and some part of Melissa and Emily's lives is touching something inside you. Help this content reach more people. Leave the like if this were a video. Mentally subscribe to this type of story and activate, in your heart, the bell that reminds you of the importance of listening to the mother's instinct. Because what was about to happen in those next few weeks would mess with all of Melissa's certainties. In the following afternoons, the routine seemed the same, but it was no longer the same. Melissa would wake up early, make coffee, check Emily's lunchbox, and drop her off at school as usual. But deep down, she felt that something had changed. The simple act of folding her dance uniform and placing it on her daughter's bed for her to put on later made her chest tighten. Before, that uniform represented only a dream. Now, she seemed to carry a weight that her mind still didn't have the courage to name. The first most visible change in Emily's behavior happened on a Thursday afternoon, near the end of the third week of school. On the way to the studio, the girl spoke little, answering only what was necessary. Melissa tried again to start a conversation about the dance. "Are you already rehearsing something to show your parents?" he asked, turning the steering wheel to enter the avenue that led to the small mall. "He said maybe," Emily replied, looking out the window. "But for now it's a secret, special secret." The word secret fell on the car like a weight. Melissa felt butterflies in her stomach. She wanted to ask more, but the way her daughter had answered with a mixture of pride and obedience left her unsure of where to start. Secret of what? He thought. Secret with whom? Why? She swallowed the questions and decided to observe more before attacking head-on, afraid of scaring the girl or making her close herself even more. At the studio reception that day, something different also caught his attention. As she waited, again with a warm cup of weak coffee in her hands, Melissa saw the moment Mark called Emily into the room. He tilted his head a little, smiled, and made a gesture with his hand indicating that the girl should come in. So far, no big deal. But seconds before disappearing through the wooden door, Melissa noticed that Emily took a deep breath, as if preparing for something difficult, and pressed her lips in a thin line, holding the backpack as if it were a shield. During the class, the music seemed louder than usual. At times, Melissa found herself paying attention not only to the sound, but also to the gaps between songs, trying to pick up any strange noises. In one of these intervals, a rapid sequence of heavy footsteps was heard, as if someone were moving in a hurry inside the room, followed by a brief silence and then the return of the rehearsed rhythm. Despite the growing urge to get up from her chair and see for herself, Melissa remained seated. The head, however, did not stop. Should I put something in her bag? Am I going crazy? What if I ruin everything in her life because of a fear that is only in my head? She thought. When the class ended, Emily came out sweatier than usual and with strangely bright eyes, not exactly from fatigue, but from something Melissa couldn't define. As she approached the car, the girl held so much tension in her hands that she seemed to be trying to hide it inside her own fingers. "Is everything okay, daughter?" Melissa asked again, opening the car door. "It's," Emily replied, not very convincingly. "You look sad." "I'm not sad." "Are you afraid of something?" The girl took a few seconds, fiddling with the buckle of the seatbelt, and then said almost in a whisper, "He just wants us to get better. May we be the perfect team. He says that it is a secret between us, that not all parents would understand." Melissa's heart raced. Not all parents would understand. This phrase echoed so loudly that it sounded like a scream in the middle of a quiet room. On the outside, however, it has not yet exploded. He just took a deep breath and murmured, "Emily, secrets like that. You know that if something makes you nervous, it doesn't have to be anyone's secret, let alone an adult's, right?" The daughter just nodded, but did not complete the conversation. He changed the subject, talking about a math test, as if he wanted to get away from that topic at any cost. Melissa respected the boundary, but inside, something had definitely broken. From that day on, what had once seemed only a vague restlessness turned into a growing certainty that somewhere between the loud music and the closed door, there was a hidden truth that she could not ignore. On a rainy night a few weeks later, this feeling was confirmed in a way that Melissa would never forget. The sky over Tampa was covered in heavy clouds, and the rain was falling steadily, rattling the roof of the car as they approached the dance studio. The poles reflected yellowish lights in the puddles that formed in the parking lot, and the wind forced the branches of the trees, which swayed as if they were also restless. That afternoon, Emily had taken longer than usual to get ready. He looked at his dance uniform as if facing an old enemy, hesitating before putting it on. When she finally left the room, ready, Melissa realized that her daughter's shoulders were more slumped and that the smile, when it appeared, was short and dull. "If you don't want to go today, we won't," Melissa said, feeling that this might be the time to nip everything in the bud. Emily, however, shook her head. "He said that today it is important, that it's a special day. If I miss it, I'll get in the way of the others." That repeated use of the word special already sounded almost like a password. Even so, at her daughter's insistence, Melissa ended up giving in, although a part of her screaming inside said that it was wrong. On the way, the noise of the rain mixed with the sound of the tires on the track created an even more tense atmosphere. Emily looked out the window, following with her eyes the drops that ran down the glass, as if she were somewhere else. After dropping her off at the studio door, Melissa stood for a few seconds in the car, watching her daughter get in. Her hair pulled back into a tight ponytail, her backpack hanging from one of her small shoulders. The door closed, and Emily's figure disappeared from her mother's field of vision. Melissa then turned around, parked in the same place as always, and entered the reception. Inside, the smell of disinfectant seemed even stronger that day. Maybe it was just her impression, caused by the mixture of fear and desire to run away that she felt. He sat down in one of the chairs, but his body did not relax. His hands were sweating, even though they were cold, and his heart seemed to beat close to his throat. She tried to distract herself by checking her cell phone, but she couldn't concentrate on any message, any news, nothing. At one point, the door to the dance room partially opened, and one of the girls ran towards the bathroom, laughing with another friend. Soon after, the door was closed again, and the music continued. Melissa thought about taking advantage of that moment to get up, walk discreetly to the door, and who knows, get closer, but she felt her legs heavy. She stood there, caught between the fear of seeming invasive and the greater fear of doing nothing. When the scheduled class time finally ended, the reception was gradually filled, with fathers and mothers waiting for their children. The rain outside had subsided to a light drizzle, but the sky was still dark. The door to the room opened, and the girls began to leave, one by one, sweaty with red faces, adjusting their clothes, talking loudly. Emily was one of the last. As soon as she saw her, Melissa stood up immediately. The girl walked slowly, and when she got close to her mother, she reached out to hand over the backpack. It was then that Melissa realized that her daughter's hands were too cold, almost as if she had put ice on them. At the same time, Emily's face was very hot, her cheeks reddened, as if she had run a marathon. "My God, Emily, you're shaking," Melissa murmured, holding her daughter's fingers, which vibrated along with the hem of her backpack. "It's just the warm-up, Mom," she replied too quickly. "He made us repeat it several times. It's just tiredness." The girl did not look her mother in the eye when she said this. Instead, he focused on the floor, as if he was afraid that Melissa's gaze would reveal something hidden. The tremor in her fingers spread through her arms, and even her seatbelt, when they went to the car, vibrated a little when she pulled it to close. As she drove back home, with the light rain marking the window and the wiper making its constant movement, Melissa felt her chest tight like few times in her life. The lights from the Tampa streetlights passed through the wet glass and created streaks of light on Emily's face, which looked even paler as the path went on. The girl curled up on the bench, hugging the backpack against her chest, as if she wanted to hide inside it. "Emily, look at me for a little bit," Melissa asked, stopping at a stoplight. The daughter turned her face away slowly. Her eyes weren't red with tears, but there was something different there, a strange glow, as if she'd been holding back tears for a long time. Melissa felt a lump in her throat so big that she had trouble swallowing. "Did something happen today?" he asked. "Look, I'm not talking about tiredness. I'm talking about anything. Did something make you afraid?" Emily took a deep breath, and for a moment it seemed like she was going to say something. Her lips opened, but she closed them again, as if an invisible hand covered her mouth. "It's just the warm-up, Mom. He says that the body trembles when it is getting stronger." The girl repeated, almost as if she were reciting a memorized phrase. "It's okay. Really." The word truth said that way sounded like a lie so big that it almost made Melissa stop the car right there. But she didn't want to scare Emily anymore, so she kept driving, her heart beating so loud it seemed to fill the silence between one question and another. That night at home, Emily went straight to the shower and then to the bedroom. He said he was sleepy, that he wanted to go to bed earlier. When Melissa entered the room to say goodnight, she found her daughter curled up to her bed, the blanket pulled up to her chin, her eyes open, staring at a fixed point in the ceiling. The light from the lampshade cast soft shadows on the walls, and the fan spun slowly, making a constant noise. "Do you want me to stay here for a while?" Melissa asked. Emily nodded, saying nothing. The mother sat on the edge of the bed and began to caress her daughter's hair, in an automatic gesture that came from when the girl was a baby. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The house was quiet, except for the distant sound of a car passing on the street and the occasional click of the clock in the living room. When she thought Emily was almost asleep, Melissa began to stand up, but she felt her daughter's small hand hold her arm tightly. "Stay a little longer," the girl murmured. "I had a strange dream the other day, that someone was looking at me too much in a place full of mirrors." Melissa's heart almost stopped. Even without making a direct connection to the studio, the image was too clear to ignore. "Here at home you are safe, my love," Melissa whispered, swallowing her tears. "Never forget that. And if something scares you, you tell me. Always." She stayed there until she saw her daughter's eyes close for good. Then she left the room and closed the door slowly, as if any noise could break an invisible layer of protection she was trying to create around that girl. That night, Melissa just didn't sleep an eye. He lay in his own bed, looked at the dark ceiling and heard, in his head over and over again, Emily's faint voice inside the car, saying that the tremor was just from the heating, that everything was fine, that it was true. The problem is that the more she repeated it in her mind, the more she felt that it was all a huge lie, a blanket that was too thin, trying to hide something serious. The hours passed slowly. The digital clock on the bedside table marked each minute with a red light that seemed to mock her inability to rest. His body was exhausted, but his mind was alight. With each attempt to close his eyes, images emerged. The door to the dance room closed, the music lowering. Mark's voice in a low tone, saying that the class was special. His hand adjusting Emily's arm, his daughter's face trembling in the car with cold hands. At some point between one sigh and another, Melissa thought clearly for the first time, "My God, there's something wrong. I'm not crazy. I can't ignore that. If I'm right, every minute I wait is one more minute she stays there in that place." This phrase, which was born as a loose thought in the dark of the room, soon turned into a point of no return. She realized that she could no longer continue with the routine, as if nothing was happening. Her maternal instinct, so often questioned by herself, now screamed loudly, asking for action. But what happened in the next few hours would destroy all the certainties she had, because from that point on, doubt would cease to be just a vague sensation and would start to rely on signs that no mother, in her right mind, could continue to pretend she did not see. If you're here so far, it's because this story is moving you, just as it has moved every bit of Melissa's life. What follows will show the exact moment when everything changed inside her, the minute when fear turned into a decision. In a video, it would be at this time that it would be said that, in the end, the full outcome would be revealed with details that few know, and so it would be worth staying until the last second. Here, the invitation is the same. Keep following, because nothing that happened afterwards was by chance, and every little sign will make sense when the truth comes out. The day after that night of almost 0 hours of sleep, Melissa woke up with a heavy body, but with a different clarity in her mind. She knew that if she wanted to protect Emily, she would need to start looking at everything more carefully and less willing to explain things to herself with sentences that only calmed but didn't answer anything. Instead of just leaving her daughter at the studio door and leaving, she decided to change her position, literally. He arrived early at the scene, parked the car at a point from where he could see both the main entrance and a part of the side of the building, and turned off the engine. The leather on the steering wheel felt warmer than usual under her sweaty hands, and the air inside the car for a few moments became heavy, as if trapped along with Melissa's racing heart. She told Emily that she would wait outside in the car, that she needed to sort out some things on her phone, using the excuse so that the girl wouldn't be surprised by her constant presence. The daughter just nodded and entered, disappearing into the glass door. As soon as she was gone, Melissa reclined the bench a little, but not to rest, just to get a better view of the entrance and the high windows of the dance room, which, despite having light curtains, still let some movements through. During the first few minutes, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Fathers and mothers arrived, dropped off the children, greeted the receptionist, and then left, as usual. The movement in the corridor of the internal mall was common, with people coming and going, motorcycles parked outside, the distant smell of food coming from some nearby restaurant. Several times, Melissa almost convinced herself that she was exaggerating, that maybe it was just fatigue and rehearsal rigor that made Emily that way. But shortly after the class began, something specific caught her attention. Melissa watched as Mark entered the room with the girls, closed the door, and a few minutes later went back to the doorknob to lock it carefully. Then he hung a small sign on the door that said, "Do not disturb," written in plain English. The mother felt a shiver rise up the back of her neck. Why lock the door, with so many children inside? She thought, feeling her stomach turn. Why doesn't anyone else seem to notice this? Is it just because of concentration, or is there something that can't be seen? She stood there, standing there, watching. At one point, before the start of one of the classes, he saw Emily leaning against the wall of the inner corridor, with her backpack on her back and her hands in front of her body. The girl bit her lower lip so hard that it seemed about to hurt her own skin. Melissa squeezed the steering wheel, almost feeling her nails mark the material. It was then that Mark appeared after his daughter. He approached slowly, put his hand on Emily's shoulder, and said something very close to her ear. Even far away, through the glass and the distance, Melissa saw the girl's body shrink slightly at the touch, as if she had received a small shock. Although then she forced a shy smile and nodded obediently. Melissa's heart raced in a way that almost made her open the car door at the same time and run there, but she held back, at least for the moment. Instead, the questions began to come in, one after the other, faster than she could answer. Why does this door need to be so closed? Why does he speak so close to her ear? Why does she shrink her body and then try to smile? Am I seeing beyond what's really going on, or is that exactly what's happening and no one wants to see it? As she struggled with these questions, Melissa's breath grew shorter, and a thin layer of cold sweat covered her forehead. Her hands were still on the steering wheel, almost immobilized, as if that position was the only thing that prevented her from running away without thinking about the consequences. At the end of that class, she didn't wait at the reception as usual. He preferred to remain outside, near the car, to observe the movement. She saw the girls come out, talking in small groups, and Emily appeared a few minutes later, her face tired and the expression that had already become known. Not exactly sad, but loaded with something the girl didn't have the courage to say. That night, lying in bed, Melissa relived every detail of the scene on the hallway wall, the tap on the shoulder, the locked door, the "Do Not Disturb" sign. For many hours, the question that echoed the most was simple but devastating. Am I crazy, or am I being the only one sober in a place where everyone is sleeping? On a Saturday, in an attempt to seek comfort and, who knows, someone to confirm her suspicions, Melissa decided she needed to listen to other mothers. It was community coffee day at a neighborhood church, a common event in Tampa where families gathered to chat, drink coffee, and eat simple cakes at long tables topped with flowered tablecloths. The hall was full of voices. The smell of fresh coffee and sweet bread filled the air, and children ran from one side to the other. She chose a table where some mothers who also had daughters at Clearwater Dance Academy were sitting. He recognized two of them by sight. A woman with blonde hair tied in a high bun, always very neat, and another with glasses, with an easy smile. After a few minutes of conversation about everyday matters such as school, chores, and supermarket prices, Melissa took a deep breath and decided to touch on the subject that brought her inside. "And your girls, how are you enjoying the dance lessons with Mark?" he asked, trying to look casual. The two women laughed, one before the other, as if the question was about the most trusted man in town. "Oh, he's an angel with the girls," replied the one with the high bun. "Seriously, I've never seen someone so dedicated. My daughter used to live on her cell phone. Now she only talks about rehearsals, rehearsals, rehearsals." "Mine too," amended the other. "He is firm, but in a good way. You want everything perfect. But that's great, right? We pay for it. He even helped pay for the costumes for the last performance when a mother couldn't afford it. One of those people that we embrace and thank for existing." Melissa felt her face heat up. She tried to smile, but inside, something writhed. "And you never found it?" "I don't know. The way he teaches a little strong," he ventured, choosing his words well. "Like too many corrections, too much pressure, secrets in a special way. Have your girls ever commented on anything like this?" The women looked at each other, as if the question was almost funny. "Of course he's demanding. That's why the class is the best in the region," said the blonde. "But secret? Ah, that's a child's thing. They love to say that it is a group secret to feel important. I don't see anything too much." "Exactly," agreed the other. "And look, if it was any serious problem, do you think we wouldn't know? He's been there for years, participated in city hall events, has photos even with important people in the city. I would be more worried if it was someone with no experience, to be honest." One of them even added, laughing, "If every daughter had a teacher like that, half the world's problems would be solved." The phrase fell like a stone on Melissa's chest. For a few minutes she felt small, almost ridiculous, as if she were the only one seeing shadow where everyone else saw light. An uncomfortable thought arose. What if it's really just in my head? What if I'm being unfair to him, creating monsters that don't exist, just because I'm afraid the world will harm my daughter? She tried to swallow that thought along with a sip of coffee, but the taste, at that moment, became too bitter. The discomfort did not go away. If on the one hand, those answers made her doubt herself, on the other hand, they showed that if something was really wrong, she could not count on anyone's quick understanding. The responsibility became even greater and more lonely. On the way home, driving through the streets she already knew so well, Melissa had one certainty. If she really wanted answers, she would have to find them on her own. She couldn't rely on the opinion of the other mothers, nor on Mark's impeccable reputation, nor on the welcoming smile of the receptionist. He would need to follow his own path, no matter how heavy it was. If this story is already changing the way you see a mother's care and what protection means in places that everyone calls safe, imagine what it will still reveal. If it were a video, this would be the time to ask you to like, subscribe, and activate the bell so that more women know this message. In real life, there is only the silent request that you do not close your eyes to signs that appear in the routine, even when the whole world insists on saying that everything is fine. At home, on a quiet afternoon, the facade of normality continued to try to sustain itself, but what happened within those walls was no longer the same as before. Melissa's one-story house, with its porch and swing, seemed to watch in silence as Emily transformed. The girl, who had previously danced alone in the living room to any music, gradually began to avoid anything that resembled dancing. One night, the two of them were in the living room, with the television on, when a program with children's dance performances began. Before, this kind of thing made Emily stop what she was doing, sit in front of the screen, and watch in delight. This time, however, as soon as she saw the stage and the costumes, the girl took the remote and changed the channel quickly, as if she had burned her hand when touching something too hot. "Don't you want to see it?" Melissa asked, surprised. "You always did." "I'm sick of this," Emily replied, not looking at her mother. "We already see this too much there." The dry way she said there made Melissa feel a shiver. It wasn't just a lack of interest, it was almost rejection. And this rejection seemed more like fatigue and fear than a simple change of taste. The nights also began to change. Emily, who until recently slept with the light off, began to insist that the lamp be turned on. Some mornings, Melissa found her sweaty, her sheets overturned, breathing fast, as if she had just run. When her mother woke her up carefully, the girl said she had had a strange dream, but avoided telling the details. One of those nights stood out in Melissa's memory. Emily woke up with a small scream, sat up on the bed, and looked around as if she were lost. Melissa ran to the bedroom, turned on the lamp, and sat down next to her daughter. "What happened, my love?" he asked, running his hand over the girl's back. I dreamed I had a lot of mirrors, and someone kept looking at me too much, and I couldn't get out," Emily murmured, still halfway between sleep and wakefulness. The description was almost a photograph of the studio, with its walls full of mirrors and the constant presence of the professor. Melissa felt her chest burn, but she didn't want to pressure her daughter at that moment. Instead, he hugged her tightly and stayed there until his small body relaxed again. During the day, in the quieter hours, she sometimes tried to talk to Emily more directly about it all, but the girl seemed to have developed an almost automatic ability to change the subject. Whenever her mother mentioned dance class, teacher, or rehearsal, Emily immediately talked about school, a new friend, homework, the neighbor's dog that kept running away from the backyard. Melissa, however, began to notice small physical signs that did not match her daughter's speech. The girl's hands, for example, used to be very tight against each other when the subject approached the studio. Sometimes she wrapped the napkin cloth so much between her fingers during dinner that the fabric would become twisted. One afternoon, picking up her backpack to wash, Melissa noticed that inside, the strap was slightly torn, as if it had been pulled hard many times. A few days after that coffee at church, when the feeling of being alone in her own suspicion was already deep, Melissa had another silent shock. When she tidied up Emily's room while she was putting the books in order on the desk, she found, between notebooks and pencils, a small folded paper. It was not exactly a note, but a piece of paper torn from a notebook with children's letters written in a hurry. On the paper, something simple but devastating read, "I can't speak. It's a secret from the class. He said that if we tell him, we can ruin everything." Melissa's heart seemed to stop for a few seconds. She felt her hands get cold, and the floor for a moment seemed farther away. He sat on the edge of Emily's bed, still holding the paper, and read the sentence several times, as if he wanted to find another interpretation other than the one that stood out. Class secret. If we tell you, it can ruin everything. The words, together, formed a clear warning. There was something inside that dance room that should not reach the ears of the parents. At least, not according to those who had created this rule. In that instant, the will to protect Emily turned into something even stronger, a mixture of fear and anger that burned inside. A part of her wanted to immediately get in the car, drive to the studio, open the door by force and end it at once. Another part, however, knew that it needed to think calmly, to find a way to see with its own eyes what was really happening there, without anyone having time to hide anything. It was then that an idea began to draw itself in her mind, still in fine strokes, but with enough force to make her breathe deeper. If no one was willing to listen to her suspicions, if no one wanted to see signs that were already clear to her, then perhaps the only way out was to be there, in silence, at the right moment, to see the truth hidden behind that door. Nothing in this story happened by chance. Every look from Emily, every trembling in her hands, every locked door, every muffled laugh followed by silence, every time the word secret was used, formed a set of pieces that, little by little, came to fit in Melissa's mind. What you are discovering here may be just the missing piece to understand everything a mother is capable of feeling, even before she has clear evidence in her hands. And just like in a video, in which the promise is that the most surprising moment is yet to come, here it is also worth staying, because the courage that is born of fear is what will guide the next steps of this story, bringing the mother closer and closer to the truth she fears so much and, at the same time, needs to find. After that night, when Emily woke up scared, talking about mirrors and looks that didn't leave her alone, Melissa understood that she could no longer postpone what she had been feeling for weeks. When her daughter finally fell asleep again, she went to the kitchen without turning on all the lights. He only turned on the one on the ceiling, cold, which threw a hard white on the table. The rest of the house was in half shade, silent. It was late. The clock on the refrigerator was almost midnight, but her mind was so lit that it seemed impossible to imagine sleep. He sat down with a simple notebook in front of him, one of those hardcover, flowery ones he used to write down bills and shopping lists. Now, however, that notebook would have another function. He took a pen, took a deep breath, and before writing, spent a few seconds just staring at the blank page. He felt his heart racing, his breath short, but along with the fear also came something new, a decision. If I don't organize this, they'll say it's all in my head, she thought. If I have nothing but sensation, no one will listen to me. But if I put everything here, detail by detail, maybe I can prove first to myself that I'm not crazy. It started with the date he saw the Clearwater Dance Academy ad on the market. He wrote, "Saturday early fall, poster at the market," and next to it he wrote, "Emily with a twinkle in her eyes, asked to try." Below, he recorded the day of the first class, the way Mark received them, the touch on his daughter's forearm, Emily's forced smile, the too red face. Then, day by day, he tried to remember everything that had happened. He wrote about the music that suddenly went down, about the "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door, about his daughter's cold hands in the parking lot, about the phrase, "It's just the warm-up. He wants us to be special." He also recorded the paper found in the room, the phrase about class secret, the way Emily began to avoid dance shows on television. Each line that appeared on the paper seemed to better align the thoughts within it. As she filled the pages, Melissa felt something strange, a mixture of fear and relief. Fear because when seeing everything there, black and white, the story ceased to be a confusing cloud and became a logical sequence that pointed in one direction only. Relief because, in a way, that notebook was a silent witness to everything she had been perceiving on her own. At some point, on the third or fourth page, she stopped, put down her pen, and put her hands to her face. His eyes burned. She thought about how many mothers, all over the world, must have ignored similar signs for fear of being called exaggerated, for not having anyone willing to listen. "I'm not going to be one more," she murmured, alone in the kitchen. "I'm not going to wait for something worse to happen to say I felt I was wrong." When he raised his face, he saw his wallet on the counter. Inside it, "I knew I had a little money set aside for emergencies." And at that moment, as much as he had no fire, water, or medicine at stake, he felt that he was indeed facing an emergency. He got up, took his purse, put his wallet inside, and walked slowly to the door, trying to make the least noise. He looked down the hallway. Emily was sleeping, the lamplight still on, the house quiet. He went downstairs, stepped out onto the balcony, and breathed in the fresh Tampa night air. There were few stars visible because of the city lights, but that didn't matter. He got in the car, started the engine, and drove to an electronics store that was open late on a nearby avenue. It was a simple place with a tired neon sign and windows full of various devices, from headphones to small radios. He entered with quick steps, trying not to think about the time. The attendant, a young man, looked up from his cell phone as she approached the counter. He asked for a small tape recorder, something discreet, that could be hidden inside a backpack without attracting attention. The boy showed two models, one silver and one black, the size of a closed hand. Melissa chose the smallest, the most discreet. As he swiped the barcode at the checkout, she felt a heavy conscience. "I'm putting this in my daughter's backpack," she thought. "I'm invading a space that, deep down, is hers. But if I don't, who's going to protect her? If I don't hear with my own ears what happens inside, how am I going to be able to look at anyone and say I'm sure?" He paid in cash, put the device in his purse, and returned home with his heart beating faster than usual. On the way, the red lights of the traffic lights seemed to take longer to change, and the noise of the tires on the asphalt sounded too loud inside the silent car. Back in the kitchen, he sat down at the table again and took the tape recorder out of the box. He read the instructions carefully, tested the buttons, heard his own voice saying, "Test, test," at low volume. The clarity of the sound amazed her. He imagined that device inside Emily's backpack, capturing laughter, footsteps, songs, and perhaps words that should never be said to children. He then took the dance backpack that hung on the hook near the door. He opened the zipper, took off his sneakers, the pink water bottle, a face towel. He looked for an inside pocket that wasn't too obvious. There was a small side compartment, which they almost never used. There, he fitted the recorder, so that the part where the microphone was facing the outside of the fabric. At that moment, Melissa's heart raced again. For a second, he thought about giving up. What if she realizes? What if the recorder falls? What if an adult finds it? What if someone decides to search the backpack for any reason? The mind questioned in an avalanche. But the memory of Emily's trembling hands, the phrase "class secret," and the dreams of mirrors spoke louder. If no one wants to hear my doubts, then I'll listen to what's going on inside, he thought, with a bitter taste but a new firmness in his inner voice. He zipped his backpack, put his things in place, took a deep breath, and turned off the kitchen light. The next morning, the day seemed like so many others, but inside her everything was different. He made coffee, heated bread, poured juice for Emily, but his hand trembled slightly as he brought the glass to the table. The daughter noticed that her mother was quieter. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked, spreading jam on the toast. "I'm just tired," Melissa replied, without staring at her for long. He didn't want the girl to notice anything strange, especially in relation to the backpack. When it was time to leave for dance class, her mother's heart seemed to be pounding in her throat. He saw Emily pick up her backpack, put the straps on her shoulders naturally, without noticing anything different. A brief relief passed through Melissa. In the car, silence dominated again. The girl looked out the window, moving her fingers over the fabric of her pants in a gesture that had already become familiar. When they arrived at the studio, the routine was repeated. Emily went downstairs. Melissa wished her a good lesson, smiled, and her daughter entered through the glass door, her ponytail wagging at her back. As soon as the girl crossed the door, however, Melissa's breathing changed. She knew that on that day she would not only be at the mercy of impressions. There would be, inside that backpack, a silent witness. She parked the car a little further away so as not to attract attention. He stayed a few minutes inside the vehicle, looking at the clock, listening to his own heart. She thought about whether she should go in and wait at the reception, but decided not to risk any searches or look more closely at the backpacks on that particular day. He also thought that perhaps it would be better not to be so close. The thought of imagining the tape recorder working alone in that closed room was enough to make her tremble. As time passed, thoughts ran over each other. What if there is nothing, he wondered. What if I'm really imagining it? What if, when I hear it, it's just music, innocent laughter, normal corrections from a dedicated teacher? A part of her desperately wished it was that nothing much appeared in the audio, that it was only his fault for having too hard looks at the world. The other part, however, knew that every sign, every phrase, every tremor was not there by chance. As the expected end time approached, Melissa returned to the parking lot, tried to compose herself, and entered the mall's corridor with restrained steps. The studio reception was as usual. Some people arriving, some leaving, muffled music coming from the main room. The difference that day was that, in addition to the concern with what she would see on her daughter's face, there was also the awareness that, in her backpack, there was something that was worth gold to the truth. Emily left as usual, hair clinging to her forehead from sweat, red face, cold hands clutching her backpack. When he saw his mother, he smiled, but it was a short smile, a little tired. "How was the class?" Melissa asked, trying to keep her tone light. "Normal," Emily replied, as always. "He's going hard because the presentation is coming." The two walked towards the car. Melissa tried not to look at the backpack insistently, so as not to arouse suspicion. Back home, the girl took a shower and went to her room to do her homework. The mother waited a while, long enough for the routine to seem intact, and then called, "Emily, let me get your dance backpack. I think I'll check it out if there's anything to wash." The girl answered a distracted "okay" without taking her eyes off the notebook. Melissa grabbed her backpack, carried it to her own room and closed the door. Her breath held her breath. His hands trembled. He opened the zipper, reached for the side pocket, and felt the tape recorder there, still in place. The device was hot, as if it had absorbed not only sounds, but also all the tension of that environment. He pressed the stop button, then the save button. Then he adjusted it to reproduce, but not there. He put the device in the sock drawer, locked the drawer with a key he almost never used, and returned to the kitchen, trying to act natural. It had been a long time since my heart felt so heavy. The hours until it was acceptable to lock herself in her room seemed to be ending. When night finally came, Emily was already in her pajamas, lying in bed, and asked once again to sleep with the lamp on. Melissa stayed there for a while, talking about light matters, until she saw her daughter fall asleep. Then, with silent steps, he got up, turned off the light in the hallway, and entered his own room, closing the door carefully. He sat up on the bed, pulled out the drawer, took out the tape recorder, and placed it on the mattress. The device seemed too small to carry something so big. The silence of the house at that moment was almost frightening. Melissa spent a few seconds with her finger on the play button without the courage to press. After I hear it, there's no turning back, he thought. If I don't hear anything, I'll have to deal with the guilt of having been suspicious. If I hear something, I'll have to deal with the responsibility of taking action. He took a breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and finally pressed the button. At first, what she expected came: the sound of the door opening, footsteps of children entering, backpacks being placed on the floor. Then the sound of loud music, marked beats, distant voices of girls laughing, trying to keep up with the rhythm. You could hear the echo of the studio, the shuffling of feet on the wooden floor, the sound of clapping in some time count. It was almost possible to visualize the scene through the audio. For a few minutes, nothing was very out of the pattern. Melissa heard Mark's voice calling the beginning of the class, giving warm-up instructions, saying words like "louder," "faster," "yes," "well done." In some passages his voice even sounded excited, almost playful. There was general laughter, small comments among the girls. Nothing there would justify yet the knot in her stomach she felt. But at a certain point, the music was diminished. The sound of the device became more muffled, and it seemed that the recorder had changed position, perhaps because Emily had fiddled with her backpack. Still, it was possible to hear when Mark said something like, "Now, circle. Everyone in a circle. I want to look at each one of you." The word "circle" came clear. There was a shuffling of feet, and the girls' voices became closer, in a hubbub that little by little was silenced. The music was turned off completely. For a few seconds, all that could be heard was breathing, small breaths of tired children and a firmer breath, probably of an adult. Melissa felt her heart racing to the point of almost hurting. The environment of the room, previously silent, seemed too cramped. The air became heavy. Even so, she did not stop the audio. Then Mark's voice came up again, now much lower and slower than before. "You know this group is different, right? You are special. Not everyone can take what you can handle." There was a nervous laugh from one or two girls, a sound almost muted. He continued, "Some of you will stay a little longer today. We have a special step, a surprise that is not for everyone. The ones I call don't come out when the song ends. Understand?" Melissa clutched the tape recorder in her hand, her nails almost digging into the plastic. His heart was beating so loud that it seemed to interfere with the sound coming from the device. The desire to disconnect was enormous, but the need to listen to the end was even greater. The music came back for a few minutes, with footsteps, laughter, small conversations of children trying to get ready. You could hear someone complaining of tiredness, another saying they were thirsty. Time passed, and then the music ceased again, this time more abruptly. Mark's voice reappeared again in a low tone. "You can take the things, girls. Just Emily, Sarah, and Chloe, stay a little longer, okay? We need to train the special step. Emily's name sounded too strong. Melissa felt her legs wobbly, even though she was sitting. He heard the noise of backpacks being dragged, zippers opening, conversations moving away. Gradually, the noise of many children went out of reach, and only a few closer sounds, breaths, softer footsteps remained. In the midst of this sound, a childish voice, which she would recognize anywhere, appeared faint. "I'm shaking." It was Emily. The sentence came out short, almost embarrassed, but the tape recorder caught it. There was a short interval, maybe a second, maybe less, that to Melissa seemed endless. Then Mark's answer came in a tone that made his mother's skin crawl from head to toe. "That's normal. Your body is reacting. Trust me. Don't tell anyone yet, it's a surprise." The words, "trust me" and "don't tell anyone," fell on Melissa like an avalanche. She took the recorder out of her ear for a moment, as if she needed to breathe. The hand trembled so much that the device almost escaped. He felt a mixture of disgust, anger, and fear so intense that he had to close his eyes so as not to cry loudly and wake Emily. "He's using the word secret against them," she thought, with a painful lucidity. "He is taking her fragility, the desire not to disappoint, and turning it into a weapon. He knows they won't talk." Still breathing uncontrollably, she put the recorder close to her ear again. I needed to know more. She needed to be absolutely sure, no matter how much it destroyed her inside. She heard the sounds of footsteps, perhaps some kind of displacement, and his voice continuing to speak. Words that the tape recorder only partially picked up, but that made clear the tone of command, the idea that what was there was not for everyone. That night changed something definitively in Melissa. It was no longer possible to think of the hypothesis that it was just an exaggeration. The evidence was not yet an image, but the audio was so clear in its intent that it was enough for her instinct to cease to be just a presentiment and become a devastating certainty. The next morning, with her eyes swollen and her head throbbing, Melissa decided she needed help. "As much as I knew it was difficult, I couldn't carry it alone." He thought about the police, but did not know if the audio alone would be enough. He thought of a lawyer, but he had no immediate means. She then remembered someone who dealt daily with parents, children, complaints and problems, the principal of the public school where Emily studied. He called the school office and asked to speak to her urgently, saying that it was something serious involving an external teacher and an activity of his daughter. The secretary made an appointment for the same day, at the end of the morning. When she arrived at school, Melissa felt a mixture of shame and courage. Shame for imagining that again she could be seen as the exaggerated mother. Courage for knowing that this time he did not come empty-handed. He brought the notebook with all the notes organized and the tape recorder with the audio from the night before saved in a separate file, ready to be listened to. The director was a woman of about 60 years old, grey hair tied in a bun, thick-rimmed glasses. I had seen dozens, perhaps hundreds of parents throughout their careers, some panicked by poor grades, others furious with fights on the playground. When Melissa entered her office, she felt the director's experienced gaze analyze her at the first exchange of words. "Sit down, please," she said. "I've been told you have a serious concern." "What's happening?" Melissa took a deep breath and for the first time told everything from start to finish to someone outside the family. He talked about the ad at the grocery store, the studio in Clearwater, the way Emily changed, the dreams, the secrets, the locked door, the "do not disturb" sign, the difficulty of his daughter to speak, the note, the tremors, the tape recorder. As she spoke, her voice failed at some points, but she kept going. She was not there to appear calm. She was there to be heard. The principal listened to everything without interrupting, resting her hands on the wooden table. Her face didn't show any exaggerated feeling, just attention. When Melissa finished, she seemed to have left a huge weight in that environment. "I brought this," she said, finally, placing the notebook and tape recorder on the table. Here are the dates, the phrases, everything I could get, and here's a recording of the last class. I know it may not sound like much, but listen, please." The director picked up the tape recorder carefully, as if she were aware that there could be something important there. He adjusted the headphones he had in the drawer, put them in his ears, and pressed play. Melissa saw only her reactions. The neutral face at first, then a slight frown when she heard the request to form the circle, a tightening of her lips in the special step part, a look that hardened when Emily's voice said, "I'm shaking," and finally, a long sigh when she heard, "Trust me. Don't tell anyone yet, it's a surprise." When he took off his headphones, he rested the tape recorder on the table with even greater care. "I'm not going to say this isn't worrisome," she began, "because it is. A lot. An adult should never talk like that to a child, especially in a closed room. And what did you tell me about Emily's behavior? All this makes me uneasy." Melissa, for a moment, felt a thread of hope. Perhaps finally someone was seeing what she saw. But then he heard something that made his heart sink again. "The problem, Melissa, is that in order to involve the police or the guardianship council, we usually need something more concrete, something visual, or at least a recording in which what he does is clear in a way that anyone, hearing or seeing it, has no doubt that it is an abuse. Here he uses dangerous words. Yes, and I don't like that at all, but if I only take this audio, I'm afraid they'll say it's his interpretation. They will ask if he wasn't talking about a more intense workout, a difficult step, those things." Melissa felt the floor disappear for a few moments. "So you mean I have to wait? Something worse happens?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Do I have to wait for my daughter to get hurt for someone to believe her? What does she feel?" The principal sighed again, taking off her glasses for a second and rubbing the bridge of her nose. "That's not what I mean. But I need to be honest with you. If I forward this now without anything else, it may be that the answer is that there are not enough elements for a formal investigation. What I can do, at the moment, is to register this concern internally, leave a note that you came here with this data, and suggest that you talk to other parents. If more reports appear, if other children are showing similar signs, then we have something more robust." Melissa clasped her hands in her lap, feeling her nails dig into the skin. "I wanted to scream. Other parents?" she thought. "The same ones who call me between the lines paranoid, the same mothers who say he's an angel." "I understand that the system is like this," she said, trying to keep a thread of respect. "But with all the affection, I can't accept that we expect something worse. I know my daughter. I know something is wrong." I heard her voice trembling. I saw the way she avoids telling me. I saw her hands cold, her dreams of mirrors, the word secret repeated 1,000 times. I will not give up. I'm not going to wait for a tragedy for someone to say I was right. The principal looked at her seriously. "And you shouldn't give up anyway," he replied. "A mother who feels this needs to act. Just be prepared not to find support as quickly as you would like. I suggest that you record everything, as you are already doing. Try to talk to parents you trust more. Try perhaps to talk to a child counselor, someone specialized. But I can't promise you that today, if I knock on the door of the police with just this audio, they will open an investigation. It's the reality I have to tell you." Melissa got up from her chair, feeling like she was carrying an even greater weight than when she arrived. He thanked him out of politeness, but the feeling was that he had hit a wall head-on. He left the room with his head throbbing, his notebook pressed to his chest, the tape recorder in his bag, as if he were holding a bomb that no one wanted to see explode. As he walked down the school hallway, seeing children running around, colorful backpacks, laughter echoing, he thought about how many stories, hidden behind classroom walls, were never told because someone thought there was not enough evidence. When he got to the car, he leaned his forehead against the steering wheel and took a deep breath. For a few minutes she let the tears fall, silent. She didn't just cry for herself or just for Emily, but also for all the times she saw a mother being treated as an exaggerator, when in fact She was the only one who saw the danger. "There's no turning back now," he murmured, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I'm not going to stop here. If they want something visual, then I'll get it, even if I have to tremble inside every day until then." He started the car, drove back home, but this time the journey seemed longer. On every corner, at every traffic light, what kept her steady was a thought: if I don't do anything, I'm going to hate myself for life. If I do it and I'm wrong, I'll have to deal with it. But if I don't do it and I'm right, I don't know if I'll be able to live with this weight. If you are here, following this mother's every step, it is because this story deserves to be heard. It seems exaggerated to some, but for those who have ever felt their heart tighten because of a son or daughter, every detail makes a difference. And what comes next, with the decision to raise a piece of evidence that no one can ignore, has everything to surprise you even more. It's the kind of moment where, in a video, you would say, "Don't leave until you find out how it all ended." Here, the invitation is the same: stay, because there is still much that will be revealed. The days that followed were even more difficult. Melissa tried to talk to some mothers again in the studio parking lot, carefully repeating her concern about Mark's rigid method. Instead of acceptance, she received uncomfortable looks and answers that left her even more isolated. One of them, arranging her daughter in the back seat of the car, even said in a somewhat impatient tone, "Look, honestly, if there's one thing I don't complain about, it's Mark. My daughter improved so much after she started with it. Sometimes we project our insecurities onto others, you know. But for me, he is the best teacher she has ever had." Another added, "If every man who works with children is viewed with suspicion, no one else will want to teach anything. We need to trust someone, don't we?" That phrase kept hammering in Melissa's mind. We need to trust someone. She herself agreed with this in theory, but she could no longer include Mark on this list. With each failed attempt at alert, the feeling of screaming in a place full of people wearing headphones increased. Meanwhile, at home, Emily was getting worse. Now, the tremor came even before he got into the car. It was enough to look at the dance uniform hanging from the chair for her body to react. His hands were sweating, his face was paler, his eyes were filled with a silent anguish. On one of these afternoons, seeing her mother approaching with her backpack in her hands, Emily murmured, "I don't want to disappoint the professor." Those words were like a stab in Melissa's chest. "I don't want to disappoint the teacher." At no time had the daughter been so concerned about not disappointing her mother as she was now about him. That said more than any speech. "What about disappointing yourself?" Melissa wanted to ask, but held back. Instead, he knelt in front of the girl and, trying to keep his voice calm, said, "You'll never let me down by saying something hurts you. Never. It doesn't matter who it is. Not a teacher, not a friend, not anyone." Emily looked at her with her eyes full of water, but said nothing. She just hugged the backpack tightly, as if she were embracing fear along with it. From that afternoon, Melissa began driving to the studio with the radio off. Before, they used to listen to light music, sometimes even singing together. Now, silence dominated the interior of the car, interrupted only by the sound of her mother's heavy breathing and the noise of her own heart beating too hard. She watched her daughter's profile in the passenger seat, watching as Emily bit the inside of her cheek, wiggled her fingers non-stop, stared at a point on the horizon, as if trying to detach herself from her body. The feeling of running out of time, as if there was an invisible clock counting down the minutes until something irreversible happened, no longer left her. On many nights, lying in bed, Melissa had the physical impression that time was slipping through her fingers, and that if she didn't do something soon, she would lose the chance to stop what she feared so much. It was this feeling that led her to the most radical decision yet. If the audio had not been enough to convince someone from the outside, perhaps an image was. A recording that showed clearly what the words still left room for excuses. She began to search silently, at times when Emily was already asleep, how she could do this. He had no experience with technology, but videos on the internet explained how small, discrete cameras worked, those models that hide in everyday objects. He didn't want anything too sophisticated that would attract attention. She needed something simple, direct, that could be put in her daughter's bag without anyone noticing. On the eve of the winter performance, the studio announced extra and special rehearsals for some girls. Mark sent printed notes, which the children took home, informing them that there would be additional training, with only the students considered ready for a more advanced step. Emily arrived with crumpled paper in hand, her eyes mixing pride and fear. "He chose me, Mom, for the special rehearsal." Her voice trembled as she said special, and Melissa felt her stomach turn. There was no longer any way to postpone. If I were to discover something, it would have to be on that day. The note, at the same time, informed and opened a door to opportunity. The morning before the shoot, Melissa went to a large electronics store in a busier area of Tampa. She walked through the corridors, looking at shop windows, feigning calm, until she found the camera section. An employee approached her, offering to help. She asked for a small camera, which could record videos with sound, for a few hours, without needing too many adjustments. The seller showed tiny models, some in the shape of a button, others looking like pen drives. Melissa chose one that could be attached inside a bag, with a small lens that would be hidden between the seams. As the boy passed on the information, she thought with almost frightening clarity, "If I'm wrong, I'll carry the shame of having suspected all this. If I'm right, I'll have the proof in my hands that can save my daughter and maybe other children." None of these possibilities were mild, but only one gave some sense to the fear she felt. Back home, he read the instructions more carefully than he read the package insert of any medicine. He tested the camera, recorded a few seconds of his own room, played the video on television. The image was sharp enough, the sound captured the voices clearly. The next step would be the most delicate, to put that device in Emily's bag without her daughter noticing, and in such a way that it was at the right time to film, even partially, what happened ahead. She took the dance bag, turned it inside out, observed the seams. He found a small stitch where the fabric was double, near the top. He carefully opened a minimal space with the help of a thick needle, just enough so that the camera lens could be hidden there, pointing to the zipper opening. He fastened the body of the device from the inside with strong tape, making sure that it would not come loose with simple movements. As she did so, she felt her hands tremble and her heart beating so loudly that it seemed to echo in the room. At times, he had to stop, take a deep breath, remember why he was going so far. He remembered the audio of Emily's voice saying, "I'm shaking." He remembered, "Don't tell anyone, it's a surprise." He remembered the director's cold response about the lack of visual proof. Each memory was like a push to move on. That night, sleeping was practically impossible. Melissa lay down, but her eyes wouldn't close. The ceiling of the room seemed lower, as if it was approaching. Sometimes he would turn on his side and stare at the clock, watching the minutes pass slowly. At other times, he would get up, go to Emily's room, look at his daughter sleeping on her side, hugging the pillow, the lamp making a circle of soft light. I thought about how much I just wanted that girl to be able to grow up without carrying a fear that was not hers to carry. Back in her own bed, she repeated to herself like a mantra, "If I'm wrong, I'll carry this shame. If I'm right, I'll save my daughter." A few tears escaped, silently, and ran down the pillow. Her body asked for rest, but her mind did not. It was as if, on that eve of a special rehearsal, everything was suspended, waiting for what would come. At dawn, the air felt heavier than usual in Tampa. Outside the house, the trees swayed slightly, and the sky was a shade between blue and gray, as if he were also undecided. Melissa got up, made her coffee, called Emily in the softest voice she could. She watched her daughter arrive at the kitchen in her pajamas, her hair messy, her eyes still small from sleep. It was hard to look at that girl and not feel an immense desire to take her in my arms and say that she wouldn't need to go back to the studio anymore. But he knew that if he didn't let her go that day, he would lose the chance to record what happened in those special rehearsals. And the idea of continuing without evidence was unbearable. When it came time to pick up the dance bag, Melissa handed it into Emily's hands with her heart in her mouth. "Take care of your bag today, okay?" he just said. "Don't let anyone move." Emily was surprised by the comment. "Nobody touches her, Mum. It is only in one corner of the room." Melissa forced a smile. "Yes, I know, but it's yours. Just take care." In the car, silence was once again the third passenger. The drive to the studio seemed even longer. As she parked, Melissa took a deep breath, looked at the facade of the place that one day she thought would be a space of joy for her daughter, and now seemed like a threat. He forced a smile on Emily, as if it was just another day. "Good class, my love." "Okay," Emily replied, opening the door and slowly descending. When the girl entered through the glass door, Melissa felt her legs wobbly. Just seeing the figure of Mark emerging at the end of the hallway, greeting the girls, her body trembled. But she kept the role of calm mother, waved from afar, and as soon as Emily disappeared inside the studio, she turned her back and walked to the car, feeling every step as if she were walking on soft sand. If this story seems too heavy, it's because it's not made for distracted hearts. It's the kind of story that tests the limits of a mother's instinct, that shows how far someone can go to protect a child, even when the world insists on putting up obstacles. And what comes next, with the definitive flagrante and the consequences that will come in chain, is not for those who just want to hear any more narrative. It is for those who are willing to face the truth behind the facts, no matter how hard it may be. On the day scheduled for the special rehearsal, Melissa decided that she would not stay at the reception. He thought it safer to keep physical distance so as not to raise any kind of suspicion. He left Emily at the door, feigning tranquility, smiled at Mark, said he needed to stop by the supermarket, as he had said so many other times. Inside, however, her legs felt so weak that any false step could make her fall. As soon as her daughter entered, she went around the block, drove for a few minutes, and found a relatively quiet side street with few houses and parked cars. He stopped the car there, turned off the engine, and just listened to the imaginary ticking of his own anxiety. She didn't see what was happening inside, but she knew that if everything went well, the camera hidden in her bag would be doing what she herself couldn't: observe without being seen. The minutes ticked slowly, as if the clock had decided to play with her. Each time she looked at the phone's display, fewer minutes had passed than she felt. To escape the feeling of suffocation, he opened the window a little, felt the air enter. But that didn't help much. His chest was still tight, his hands were still sweating. At times, she wanted to call someone, to share that weight, but she didn't even know where to start. And besides, it was one of those moments when, deep down, we feel that only we ourselves can go through. After a time that seemed endless, Melissa decided it was time to go back. She started the car, entered the small parking lot of the mall, and parked in the same spot as always, trying to look like just another mother among many others. He entered the corridor, saw the reception full of people talking, children running, as if nothing serious could exist there. The door to the dance room finally opened. The girls started to leave, some tired, others more excited, all with their backpacks hanging from their backs. Emily appeared a little further back, with her face very red, her hair sticking to her forehead, and a distant look. When he saw his mother, he smiled softly, almost relieved, and walked up to her. Melissa hugged her daughter tightly, perhaps tighter than usual. He noticed once again the slight tremor in Emily's fingers as she held the sleeve of her mother's blouse. "How was it?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "It was pulled," the girl replied. "He made us repeat a special step many times, but he said that we are the best group, you're the best bunch." The phrase, which would have sounded like a compliment anywhere else, now reached Melissa's ears as a cruel reminder of how much he used sweet words to cover up something she hadn't yet seen, but had already heard and felt. Back home, Melissa needed all the calm she had not to run straight to the room with her bag. He kept the routine. He asked about school, offered a snack, listened to Emily talk for a few minutes about a group task. It was only when her daughter locked herself in her room, saying she was going to take a shower and then go to bed earlier, that her mother took her dance bag and took it to her own room. He closed the door, rested his bag on the bed, took a deep breath. Her hands were so shaky that she had to hold them for a few seconds over her legs to calm down. He unzipped it, reached for the camera body between the seams, turned off the device, feeling the small, hot device in his hands. It was as if inside was concentrated everything that no one else wanted to see. He connected the camera to the notebook in the room, hoping that the playback program would recognize the device. When the icon appeared on the screen, he clicked. He saw the recorded video file with the time that matched the rehearsal period. His heart raced even more. For a moment, she thought about calling someone, anyone, to be there when she played. But at the same time, she had the feeling that she needed to see it alone first, to prepare for the avalanche. Double-clicked the file. The screen went dark for a few seconds, and then the image began to appear. A piece of the interior of the studio, seen from a low angle, as if someone were sitting with their bag on the floor, next to a wall. You could see the wooden floor, the legs of some girls, the reflection of bodies in the mirrors. As the video progressed, she recognized the excerpts of music, the movement of the group. I had already heard something similar in another way, in the audio. Now, it was as if he were watching an enlarged version of the nightmare. For part of the time, the video showed only the routine, girls lined up, bodies spinning, Mark pacing back and forth, instructing, correcting. At times, he approached the place where the bag seemed to be, and the image trembled slightly, as if Emily had touched it unintentionally. Nothing very clear happened, until the music was turned off and the girls began to disperse. The video showed some being called by name, picking up backpacks, walking out of the room. The ambient sound has changed, becoming emptier. Then the camera caught just what Melissa feared. Mark approaching a small group that had hooked up, including Emily. The girl could be seen partially, in profile, reflected in the mirror. He placed himself behind her as if he were helping with some specific step. His hands went to the girl's arms, holding her by the forearm, lifting them up. So far, it could still be explained as posture correction, but the image showed something else, the hands sliding down the arms to the region near the armpit, in a touch that took longer than would be necessary for a simple technical correction. The camera caught Emily's body shrinking slightly, almost imperceptibly, but for a mother that movement said it all. At another point, he positioned himself next to her, much closer than would be comfortable. He put one hand on the girl's waist, guiding the hip movement, but the way he squeezed, how he kept his hand there, how he brought his face closer to Emily's ear, made Melissa's stomach revolt. It wasn't just the position, it was the proximity, the way his body occupied a space that didn't belong to him. For a moment, the camera caught a reflection in the mirror in which Emily's face could be seen. Her eyes were not cheerful. They were not focused only on movement. There was fear there, a quiet, childlike fear of those who don't know how to name what they're feeling, but feel that something is deeply wrong. Melissa put one hand over her mouth, trying to suppress a sound that threatened to come out like a scream. Tears began to flow without her even noticing. She kept watching because she knew she needed to, but every second felt like a new wound opening. In another scene, he leaned so much to speak into Emily's ear that for a second, his face almost touched her face. even without hearing clearly what she was saying. The way she averted her eyes, how her body shrunk, how her shoulders rose, was enough for any words to be dispensable. When the video finally ended, Melissa felt as if the world had collapsed at the same time as, strangely, it became absolutely clear. There was no longer room for excuses, for half-explanations, for maybe it's just his way. What she had seen was invasive, wrong, dangerous. And the most terrible thing, it had happened in front of mirrors, in a space that the entire community considered safe. For a few minutes, she remained paralyzed on the couch, staring at the now dark screen. His body trembled, his chest ached, his hands were sweating. Finally, he let the tears out, a heavy cry of indignation and pain. But along with it, another feeling began to be born, a protective anger, a calm fury that said in silence that this man would not lay hands on his daughter again. When he was able to breathe again, he picked up his cell phone with his hands still shaking. He knew that the next step would require courage, but he also knew that he was no longer walking in the dark. She saved the video in a separate folder, made a copy on a USB stick, and sent the file extremely quickly to a trusted friend, a woman she had known for years and who worked in a field related to social services. The text that accompanied the video was short, but it said it all. "I need you to keep this. It's serious. It's about Emily's dance teacher. I'll explain it to you later. Just don't let anyone delete it." As she sent the message, she felt a little security, as if she was spreading the weight between two hands instead of carrying it alone. Still, she knew that the confrontation that would come would initially be hers alone. He got up, walked to Emily's room. The girl was sitting on the bed, fiddling with a notebook, her face tired. When he saw his mother at the door, he smiled slightly. Melissa approached, sat next to her daughter, and hugged her tightly. For a few seconds, he didn't say anything, just kept his arms around her, as if he wanted to create a physical barrier between the child and the world. Emily was surprised by the intense gesture. "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked, leaning his head on her shoulder. "Nothing, my love. Or rather, a lot." Melissa took a deep breath. "I just wanted to let you know something very important." Emily waited silently. "It doesn't matter who it is," the mother continued, looking into her eyes. "It doesn't matter if it's a teacher, if everyone likes it, if it's someone the whole neighborhood trusts. If at any point your body tells you that something is wrong, that something scares you, that something makes you tremble, you can and should tell me. I'll believe you, always. Even if no one else believes it, I will." Emily's eyes filled with tears. The girl swallowed, as if the words wanted to come out, but were still stuck somewhere between her chest and mouth. "Do you believe me, even if he says I'm exaggerating?" she ventured. "I believe in you before I believe in anyone out there." The answer came firmly, without hesitation. "Your fear is no exaggeration. He is a warning, and I should have heard that warning from the beginning." Emily then began to cry, a suppressed cry, holding her face in her hands. Melissa pulled her into an even tighter hug. The two stayed like that for a while, until the girl's body relaxed a little. That night, something essential was restored between them. The certainty for Emily that she was not alone, and, for Melissa, that the love she felt could no longer be silenced for fear of what others would say. With the video still burning in her memory, the next step would be inevitable, to look into Mark's eyes and show that now the truth was no longer only inside her chest, but also on the screen of a cell phone, in the lens of a camera, in something that no one could call only mother's imagination. Before taking this step, however, if this story was in video format, this would be the ideal time for an invitation. An invitation for those who are watching to help bring real stories to people who often ignore signs due to lack of information or fear of being judged. Something like, "Before we continue, help bring real stories to those who really care." If you want to be part of this mission, don't forget to like, to subscribe, to activate the bell. Here, the request is different, that you remain present, because what is to come will show how an ordinary mother, with a cell phone in her hand and her heart in her mouth, can become the greatest force of protection in a daughter's life. When Melissa sent the video to her trusted friend and heard the immediate response, saying that it needed to go straight to the police station, she felt that, for the first time in a long time, someone saw the gravity of what she had been carrying. Following the guidance, she accessed the online reporting channel of the local Tampa police, filled out a long form, attached the video, described what had happened to Emily, talked about the previous audio, her daughter's reactions, the tremors, the dreams, the locked door, the special secrets. When she clicked on the send button, she felt that part of the responsibility was out of her hands and began to gain an institutional weight that she alone would never have. Still, he knew that there was no point in delivering the material and returning home hoping for calm. After so many half-open doors, so many lukewarm answers, I needed to be ready to go all the way. That's why, on the afternoon, he decided to confront Mark. He didn't go to the studio with only anger in his chest. It was with the cell phone charged, the video separated into an easy-to-access folder, the copy sent to the police station, and the friend on alert, ready to act if something got out of control. She walked into the reception with determined steps, her heart beating so hard she could almost hear, but her face steady. The receptionist, used to seeing her as another silent mother, was surprised by the serious expression. Melissa asked them to call Mark for a quick chat in the hallway. When he appeared, with the same trained smile as always, she wasted no time beating around the bush. He opened the video on his phone, advanced to the point where his hands were clasping Emily's arms, and without taking his eyes from his, turned the screen. She told her, in a firm voice, that she had already sent everything to the police, that she had copies saved, that she was no longer alone, and that she knew exactly what kind of pattern she had been repeating with fragile girls in a room full of mirrors. He tried to laugh, called it a misinterpretation, a technical exercise filmed from a bad angle. When she realized that Melissa was unfazed, her expression changed. His eyes, once smiling, became hard. It was at that exact moment that two policemen in uniform entered through the glass door of the studio, coming from the parking lot. They had received the video, had watched it, had a quick conversation with Melissa's friend on the phone, and decided to go to the place instead of waiting for something worse to happen in silence. Before Mark could even complete the sentence he was rehearsing, one of the officers identified himself, asked him to stay where he was, and explained that there was a formal complaint and material that needed to be analyzed in depth. The receptionist looked from one to the other, confused, not understanding how that man so well regarded in the community could be approached like that. The movement caught the attention of parents who arrived to pick up their daughters. In a few minutes, a group was already forming in the narrow corridor. Melissa, with her hands shaking, took a deep breath and did what she never thought she would have the courage to do. She spoke out loud, in front of everyone. She said that it was not just a dance class misunderstanding, that it was not a misinterpreted technical touch, but a pattern of behaviors, words, forced secrets, child tremors, locked doors, special rehearsals in which the same girls were always chosen. She said that she had been observing Emily's fear for weeks, that she sought the school, that she was discredited, that she tried to talk to other mothers and heard praise for the teacher. And she said mainly that she decided to act when she heard her own daughter say, in a clear audio, that she was shaking, and heard his voice saying, "Trust me, don't tell anyone yet." Some parents took their own cell phones to see the video, which was soon shared right there in front of the reception. In a few minutes, what was just a murmur turned into a shock. Mothers put their hands to their mouths, fathers looked at the floor. Other people began to remember loose phrases that their daughters had said, discomforts that until then had been pushed under the rug with excuses such as, "He is demanding, but it is for their good." Mark still tried to say that it was all a setup, that the video had been edited, that he would never harm any child. But when the handcuffs closed on his wrists, cold, metallic, the sound echoed in that reception as the end of a story that many did not want to see. For the first time, he couldn't escape with a smile, compliments, and well-chosen words. For the first time, it wasn't a mother's word against his. It was the image, the audio, the body of a child shrinking under his hands. As the police led him outside, past the mirrors that had always reflected dance steps, but now also reflected the fall of someone who was hiding behind applause, silence took over for a few seconds. Then came the noise of questions, voices, tears. A mother approached Melissa and said, with a red face, that her daughter had complained about extra training at odd hours. Another said that the girl no longer wanted to be alone in the room after the performances. Each sentence was like a belated reflection of a mirror that now no one could pretend not to see. That day, as she watched Mark being put in the patrol car, Melissa didn't feel full relief. He felt something more complex, a tense relief, mixed with anger, fatigue, and above all, a sense of justice beginning to be done, albeit belatedly. He didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. She just took a deep breath for the first time in weeks and looked in the direction of the car where Emily was waiting for her, not knowing exactly what was happening, but feeling that something important had changed. This story matters, and a lot, because it shows, in a painful but true way, what it means to trust the maternal instinct when everything around tries to silence that voice. Countless times, Melissa was led to think that she was exaggerating, that she saw evil where there was none, that she projected fears onto someone loved by the community. In many moments, she felt that she was going crazy, because no one seemed willing to see what she saw in her daughter's eyes. And yet, she followed, took notes, recorded, observed, sought help, insisted, was called exaggerated, and continued. For other mothers who have felt a tightness in their chest when leaving their son or daughter somewhere, who have been surprised by a phrase, a look, a touch, and then called dramatic, this story is a clear message. No, you are not crazy. Your child's body speaks, behavior changes, fear manifests itself in detail, and ignoring these signs for fear of spoiling the peace can be far more dangerous than facing the discomfort of being the only one asking questions. It is a grim reality to admit that apparently good, educated, respected people can hide such serious habits and intentions. But there is also hope on this path. Hope in the fact that a mother, armed only with the courage to believe what she feels, can set in motion mechanisms of justice, can initiate an investigation, can expose a secret that has been protected by the silence of an entire community. Mark's fall didn't erase what happened. It didn't eliminate Emily's fear completely, but it did prevent him from continuing to do that to her and possibly to other children. And that in itself is a huge victory in a world where so many cases are buried. In the days following Mark's arrest, nothing was the same in Tampa, especially in the neighborhood where the Clearwater Dance Academy was located. The news spread quickly, first among parents, then through local social networks, and soon reached the pages of the city's newspapers. Headlines told of a well-known dance teacher accused of misconduct with female students, and mentioned the video that a mother had given to the police as the starting point of the investigation. In a short time, other families began to look for the police station. At least 3 mothers decided to record situations that until then had been swallowed up as something in the child's head or exaggeration of tired people. They reported similar phrases, requests for secrets, invitations to extra rehearsals with few girls, changes in behavior at home. As the testimonies piled up, it became increasingly difficult for any official to say that it was all an isolated mess. For Emily, the change also started on the outside, but it needed to happen mainly on the inside. Melissa knew that it was not enough to take her daughter out of dance classes and see the teacher in handcuffs. The fear, the trembling, the dreams about mirrors, all of this had become ingrained in the way the girl saw her own body and the world. That's when a child psychologist appointed by the school came into the picture, someone with experience to welcome children who had lived through confusing, frightening, often difficult-to-name situations. The therapist's room was the opposite of the rehearsal room. Instead of mirrors, it had light walls with colorful designs. Instead of loud music, there was a welcoming silence, broken only by calm voices. Clip-on toys, dolls, children's books, and a small table with colored pencils helped create an environment where Emily could feel at ease. In the beginning, the girl spoke little, drew more than anything. His early drawings had many hard lines, small figures next to larger forms. Over time, he began to put words. He spoke of the fear of missing the special step, of the way someone got too close, of the body shaking without knowing why. At each session, Melissa waited outside, holding her purse in her lap, her heart sinking, but also grateful to know that, this time, she had placed her daughter in the hands of someone prepared to listen without judging. Whenever they left the office, he saw Emily a little lighter. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't miraculous, but it was a path. At home, the nighttime routine has also changed. If before the conversations were often run over by fatigue, now Melissa made a point of reserving time just for the two of them on the sofa in the living room. Sometimes they watched a quiet movie. Sometimes they just hugged, in silence. In others, Emily spoke of little fears, of the dark, of being alone in a room, of being called to anything special at school that wasn't clearly explained. And every time her daughter opened up, Melissa reinforced, "You have the right to say no. You have the right to leave any place that hurts you. You don't have to be strong to please anyone." News of Mark's case was spreading through the city, and over time it reached other parts of Florida. There was indignation, of course, but there was also a deep reflection among fathers, mothers, schools, and churches. In parents' meetings, the topic of child protection began to gain more space. At community gatherings, religious leaders called experts to talk about warning signs, about healthy boundaries between adults and children. Melissa began to be invited to these conversations. At first, he hesitated. He didn't see himself as someone who was going to go on stage or get a microphone. But as she thought about how many Emily were out there, how many mothers still wondered if they were overreacting, she decided that if her pain could prevent others, it would be worth turning that experience into a wake-up call. Thus, he began to tell his story in neighborhood churches, in public school auditoriums, at small events in cities like Clearwater, Tampa, Orlando. He did not give details beyond what was necessary. He did not seek sensationalism. She talked about the advertisement in the market, the sparkle in her daughter's eyes, the first tightness in her chest, the locked doors, the audio, the video, the special secrets, and above all, the time it took to be taken seriously. He always repeated a phrase that became almost a motto. When instinct screams, it's better to listen. Some women sitting in the metal chairs of these meetings cried when they heard it. Others took notes, thinking about their own children and grandchildren. Many men also started to look more closely at what their children told them about sports, extra classes, two charismatic leaders. Melissa and Emily's story, although painful, turned into a kind of collective protection. Where once there was only blind trust, now there was trust coupled with loving vigilance. 1, 2, 3 years passed. Mark was formally charged, faced prosecution. During the investigation, more reports emerged. Melissa's video, along with other testimonies, was a key piece. In the end, he was convicted and permanently removed from living with children. It has not disappeared from the memory of the city, but it has disappeared from the spaces where it used to circulate so freely. For many families, knowing that he would no longer have access to girls like Emily brought a kind of peace that was hard to explain. Emily, now a little older, no longer trembles when listening to any music. She still didn't want to go back to studio classes, and Melissa never pressured her. At home, however, sometimes, alone in the living room, the girl allows herself to swing her body to the sound of a song she likes, without mirrors, without commands, without anyone looking too closely. The dance, little by little, separates from the bad memory and recovers a lighter place. And if one day she decides to go back to a dance school, Melissa knows that this time she will be attentive from the first look, from the first door they insist on keeping closed. The relationship between the two became even stronger. There were fights, as in any mother-daughter relationship. There were moments of tiredness, of adolescence approaching, of divergent opinions. But underneath it all, there is something solid. The certainty that when Emily says, "This makes me uncomfortable, this scares me, this doesn't feel right," it will not be ignored. The certainty that behind rules, schedules, commitments, and appearances, there is a house where her word has weight. As she looked out her kitchen window, seeing the tall trees swaying in the gentle Florida wind, Melissa realized one day that her life would never be the same. Not because the pain had suddenly disappeared, but because now she understood the strength she had always carried, and that for so long she tried to diminish so as not to bother anyone. The image of Emily trembling in those early days of school still appeared in her dreams, but now it was accompanied by the memory of the courage she had to face a man admired by the entire community and say, "Enough." She remembered every detail: the narrow hallway of the Clearwater studio, the muffled sound of dance music wafting through the door, the smell of sweat and disinfectant that permeated the air, the rough feeling of the phone in her hand as she showed the video to the teacher. At that moment, the fear gave way to something bigger, a kind of calm fire that burned inside and said, "Do whatever it takes, but don't give up on your daughter." It's this fire that she wants other mothers to recognize within themselves, even if the whole world says they're overreacting. Today, months after Mark's arrest, Emily can already listen to a song and move her body without shrugging her shoulders, although, for now, she has chosen not to return to the world of dance studios. No one pressures her to do so. The therapy sessions in Tampa helped the girl understand that nothing was her fault, that the trembling of her body was the way her soul found to ask for help when words didn't come out. The therapist taught her that when someone says, "Don't tell anyone," this is precisely the sign that something is wrong, and Melissa reinforces this at home, in simple conversations, in the middle of everyday tasks. At night, when Emily lies in bed and calls her mother to sit next to her, the two talk about small fears, about limits, about the right to say no to any adult, no matter how nice it may seem. They talk about good teachers they had, so that the girl knows that the world is not only danger, but also how important it is to pay attention to those who cross the line. These conversations are not grand speeches. Sometimes they are born from a simple question, from something Emily heard at school, from a memory that she decides to bring up. The important thing is that the channel is open, with no secrets. For many women over 45 who hear this story, something stirs up old places. How many times in the past have they felt that tightness in their chest and been called exaggerated, dramatic, paranoid? How many times have they been suspicious of a look that is too long, of a touch that has gone beyond the point, of a closed door and ended up being silent for fear of spoiling the peace of the family or the community? How many times have you heard phrases like, "Stop being an exaggeration. You see evil in everything. He's a great person. He would never do that." Melissa's experience shows that when it comes to protecting a daughter, a son, a grandchild, there is no exaggeration. There is care. There is an instinct that sometimes manifests itself as a tightness in the chest, as an insomnia that does not go away, as a thought that does not leave the head alone. And while it's not easy to go against what most people say, While it hurts to be the first to raise your voice, that's exactly what can prevent greater pain in the future. Melissa doesn't see herself as a heroine, but as a mother who decided one day to stop asking permission to believe in her own intuition. She knows that without the video, without the audio, maybe she would still be struggling to convince people that there was something wrong. But he also knows that without that first tightness in his chest, without those first "it's not normal" that he felt, without being able to explain, he might never have gotten to the point of looking for evidence. It was her restless heart that made her take the notebook, buy the tape recorder, learn how to use the camera. It was instinct that opened the door to justice. By sharing her story in churches, schools, and neighborhood gatherings, she reminds other women that you don't have to live in a big city for dangers to lurk behind polite smiles. All it takes is a small studio, a friendly teacher, a distracted community. All it takes is a place where no one questions why the door needs to be locked all the time, why so many things are secrets, why so many girls leave with cold hands and hot faces. It also takes a mother with courage to turn on the light and decide that in that house, in that small body, no one will touch without respect. This light is not only made of screams and confrontations. Sometimes it is made up of notebooks, recordings, conversations with directors, messages sent to friends, sleepless nights, hands shaking over a play button. But it is light, and it drives away the darkness where silence tries to hide. As Emily sleeps peacefully in her room, with the window open to the warm breeze of Tampa, the sheets now at peace, Melissa knows that this is the true legacy. To teach her daughter and other girls who cross her path that her feelings are signs, not exaggerations, that a body that trembles without explanation deserves to be heard, that a child's no is worth more than the "he would never do that" of an entire community, and that there can always be a mother ready to listen, act, and, if necessary, face the world so that no closed door hides. Again, what should never have happened. If this story were on a video screen, this would be the time to take a deep breath, look inside, and ask yourself, in how many situations have I ignored signs myself because I was afraid of being judged? How many times did my intuition speak louder and I shut it up? The good news is that it's never too late to start listening to this voice more fondly. Don't leave without taking the next step on this journey. Imagine that now on your screen, another chapter appears, another story of instinct, of protection, of courage. On a channel like this, you are invited to continue discovering stories that touch the heart and awaken the conscience. Let each of them remind you of something simple and powerful. A mother's voice, when she decides to speak, can be the line that separates fear from security, secrecy from truth, silence from justice. A big hug, and may you move forward, carrying that light into the next exciting story that crosses your path.